Hello, fellow AOCCers. This is Tim, N6WIN. This presentation is being recorded by Lee, KY7M, because I'm currently on the road to K3LRs to pick up new antennas. So this presentation is entitled Creating a New Contest Caliber Station. As many of you know, I've created a station up in Wickenburg, Arizona. And I wanted to go over a few things in regards to that station with you. We're going to go over the goals of the station, selecting the right QTH, construction of the QTH, infrastructure, the shack and equipment shed, and how does it work, along with what's planned. So it all starts with the team. As I've stated, I'm Tim, N6WIN, the owner, and my good buddy Dan, N6MJ, he brought his contesting drive and experience to motivate the thought that we could build something above average to compete from the western part of the country. Hector, XC2K, as many of you already know, he is my primary installer. John, K6AM from Southern California, is my head Skunksworks designer. He makes all the special black boxes that make everything in the shack work well for multi-single, upwards of SO3R for some of our contests. Chris, KL9A, and Nate, N4YDU. These are the guys who kept us on us about not settling too much and how we might continue to improve our thoughts about the station from the design process upwards and through the implementation of installing the equipment and how the stations worked. Been very fortunate to have everybody in my corner giving me their suggestions from their expertise, from the experience level. And I think it's really turned into a nice thing. Goals of the station: to be able to win domestic contests, to be competitive in DX contests in our region, to have fun exploring propagation from the Southwest, to have reliable and emergency communication ability in the rural setting up there, and to have fun with friends. So selecting the right QTH. One of the first things I checked when looking at this land was the county regulations were reviewed by myself for applicable rules on towers. Made sure with my real estate agent that CC&Rs wouldn't be a problem. The main thing is I did not want to purchase any land in which the regulatory agencies would have a problem with my personal interests. This picture here is kind of a little bit of a tower going up by one of the local equipment rental tractors. My father-in-law and Nate N4YDU were giving me a hand on a pretty hot, sunny field day morning in June of 2019. So during the selection of the right QTH, I gotta say, I can't tell you just how many HFTA scenarios were run. This was during the course of months before the purchase of the land and after the purchase of the land. During the course of buying material, HFTA was relied on heavily again to make sure that I was thinking about which antennas would be going in which heights and on which towers and for what reason. The world-winning contesters at the worldwide CW and WRTC level were consulted on a daily basis in regards to what to focus on and what to avoid. Again, I was very blessed to have the input from Dan, Chris, and Nate continually as we set up a WhatsApp chat group to constantly go over these matters. Google Earth and graph paper were definitely some of my best friends in this process. They were used extensively to plan angles with high interest on what could be done to minimize interstation interference. As pictured, the book Managing Interstation Interference by W2VJN was used as a very good guide in helping me understand what I could do to minimize the interstation interference that I experienced quite extensively in my past, having owned a single tower on a city lot. And with a blank canvas of land, keeping in mind regulations and safety, I thought to myself, what can I do to place antennas on towers in appropriate positions so that when they're pointed where I plan to have them pointed, we'd have a minimum amount of interaction. Construction of the QTH. The towers were selected. I purchased a truck and trailer Antennas were selected, coax was selected, switches and filters were selected, a shack was selected, and during that time, I went out a little fast on the gun there with the slideshow going forward, but during that time, I picked up a really neat GPS antenna that would talk to my iPhone via Bluetooth to enhance the accuracy of my ability to walk the land. At that point, creosote was up in a lot of places and so forth, and it was pretty tough to determine just where I was at on the 5 acres. But with that use of the GPS and the iPhone, as shown here in this photo, I was able to find out that after I paid for a civil engineer to come out and shoot all sorts of coordinates in regards to the shack, the house, and where the towers and guy anchors were going, that I was generally somewhere between 6 inches, as I recall, and pictured here, 14 inches off in plotting and staking myself where I'd place things before the pro engineer came out, whose equipment was said to me to be plus or minus 3 inches. So I thought that was a pretty neat thing. All of my towers and guy anchors were placed per the civil engineer. So when somebody asks, you know, hey, how do you know that's going to fall on your land or it's in the right place? I got a multi-$1,000 bill and a civil engineer's E&O to back me up on that. Construction of the QTH tower selected. I chose 2 guy level 130-foot R65G equivalent towers. These towers are strong enough to survive the local winds, so while supporting the planned stacks of Yagis. The bases were dug a little bit bigger than called for because of the way I dug it with a mini excavator that I rented, but nonetheless they're 12 by 12 by 5 feet. And between the guy anchors and the 3 tower bases, there's a total of 95 cubic yards of concrete that was poured. Pictured are the different, are one of the 3 130-foot tower bases. You can see the multi-levels of rebar here in the photo, a 5-foot section that was preformed at the factory for a base unit on dobies, kept up from the dirt so that we wouldn't have too much worry of any kind of reaction from the local soil with that rebar in the tower base. After forming and pouring, this is what the tower bases looked like for a number of time until field day, when earlier shown, Nate and my father-in-law put up the first sections of tower. This was done around March of 2019 in this area right here. The truck and trailer, I was able to find myself a really nice, reliable, used 97 Ford F-350 with well sought after turbo diesel engine, the old 7.3 liter. It's not going anywhere fast, but it doesn't have to with that trailer and that load pictured. My thought process was that I'd pick up a trailer from a local place, 20-foot trailer, and a truck that would be able to haul it all around, and I could go pick up my towers myself, move my existing tower from Southern California out to Arizona. And what ended up happening is I was able to also make a trip out in 2019 to Tim K3LRs back in Pennsylvania after going all the way up to pick up KL9A in Montana and go and pick antennas up from them. So that truck and trailer has really proved to be very valuable. Early visitors. I mentioned it in field day of 2019, N4YDU, Nate, Chris, KL9A, and Dan, N6MJ traveled over to see what was going on. Like I said, they had a lot of input during the planning phase. I wanted to bring the boys out and their families to have some fun. House was supposed to be constructed at that point, but a lot of reasons had come up in which I had some delays in building the house. So as pictured, we enjoyed field day in quite a hot 5th wheel trailer with very minimal insulation. The boys got to experience what the desert's like in the middle of June in the Southwest. If I recall right, I think that trailer got down to about 90, 95 degrees with the air conditioner blaring. We had a lot of fun nonetheless, and we worked a number of stations, and the guys had a great time, as did the families in a local Airbnb rental. I think the pool was more of a hit than the actual radio operation, to be honest. Antennas selected. There are many, many options. When everything was said and done, though, I decided on the obvious. Tim K3LR was in the process of replacing all of his antennas N6MJ and KL9A were able to help me convince Tim that his old antennas would enjoy a perfect retirement in the warm and sunny skies of Arizona. I think many club members, especially those snowbirds among us, would agree. Our UPS driver learned to really loathe DX engineering during this construction phase. As pictured in my father-in-law's 8-foot truck bed, we'd fill that up pretty much every week or so as we really got going under construction. DXE was the primary source of all the needed odds and ends, along with plenty of orders to get master cars. They can fulfill an order and get it to you in a quick and timely fashion. Many other deliveries were brought in, coax from the East Coast, the hardline, etc. But I thought this was a kind of neat photo to just give an idea of just how much UPS was bringing on a weekly basis. Weather delays. October rains delayed the 70-ton crane from being able to work safely. This was the conditions as shown before Worldwide CW. And it was kind of a bummer because I had promised a couple of friends to come on over and operate, that we'd have all the towers up and we'd have all the antennas up. But those of us who lived in Arizona during that rain, unseasonable rain between October and November, can probably imagine why, as shown, that we weren't able to safely meet our goals. Nonetheless, K6AM and N0VD joined me for a multi-single high-power effort in Worldwide CW with just a C3S and wires due to the rain delays. This was the status of the Tough Shed shack that was built, and John K6AM, with his head skunkworks knowledge, made sure to come out and bring me a number of the shown little black boxes for various audio purposes, lockout purposes, amplifier transference. Being multi-single, we'd oftentimes run and hit in-band guys while the runner was working others, of course, using the lockout feature. John's well known amongst my buddies for what his talents are in making sure that that's something that happens and that we follow the rules. Days after the terrain dried, Hector and his brother were out installing the first set of top antennas. They drove back out, having left their trailer on site, came back as soon as we were dry. I think we had a 10 a.m. crane appointment, would have rather got going at 6 a.m., but everybody else, just like me, was clamoring for cranes in the area due to all the rain delays with everybody's different construction projects. We were happy to get that crane out there and in place. As shown, Hector is running the tag lines with the crane bringing up a K3LR full-size 40-meter OWA. The current setup, as of now, is a 160-meter quarter-wave vertical, an 80-meter JK801T at 145, a 40-meter K3LR 4 LOWA at 130, along with the JK404C at 140. On 20 meters, we've got a 6/6 home-brewed OWA that I spent a bit making per some K3LR data, modified for the Southwest, and the taper schedule has been modified for aluminum that I could actually get my hands on. But that's our EU stack that's at 130 and 80 feet now. There's also a used M2 20 M6JA stack at 130 and 60 on another tower, along with a JK Mid-Tri North America stack at 71 and 37 feet on a crank-up tower. 15 meters is employing a JK 1015 5L at 140 along with that mid-tri stack, and 10 meters is using that same JK 1015 6L at 140 along then the mid-tri stack. Receive antennas as of now is an EU and a separate JA 500-foot beverage. And this is the current setup. House is almost done. The shack is in place. The crank-up's lowered for the winds during the Arizona summer. Monsoons were coming days after this picture. Equipment shed is down here where the mouse is at the base of the northern tower. Should be noted that, as I'll cover in the switch slide, basically there's no control lines running from the shed to the equipment shed. Everything is powered remotely so that the low voltage relays can be switched by Green Heron RT21s. I decided to do that mainly for lightning suppression reasons. My idea being that I'll make a big barrier of lightning suppression at the towers with minimal lines coming up to the shack so that I can defend the shack and its expensive electronic equipment better. The flag there is a 20 by 30 that my father-in-law picked up. He was so impressed with the height of the towers and the status of the project. And in our small town, he enjoys knowing that on holiday weekends, I proudly fly the American flag, the biggest in our town, even surpassing those of the city centers and the gas station. It's a bit of a feat getting it up there, and sometimes requires a climb. But at the end of it, when you hear from some of the town neighbors and visitors passing on the highway, it seems to be all worth it. Coax and control lines selected. I settled on RFS 7/8 inch foam Selflex, and I direct buried it. I say settled because a lot of guys that are building stations this big have got a lot bigger hardline. But as to the price and the losses, I felt that it was the best value for my dollar at the time. Going up the towers is DXE 400 Max. LMR 400 equivalent is used for jumpers in the equipment shed and shack, and control cables are run in the conduit between towers. Grounding straps and rods. Picked up a lot of 2-inch Georgia copper straps to run between the towers. Had trenches dug by a local backhoe to facilitate that. And around the towers, along with the shack and house, per a lot of what I read from Jim, K9YC, I've got a lot of 8-foot, 5/8 inch copper ground rods installed with his writings and findings in mind. The house is additionally used as its rebar is tied in so as to affect a oofer ground. Switches and filters. All of my switches, filters, and rotors live in the equipment shed, like I showed in the picture, which is about 100 feet from the shack, at the tower bases, or at the bed of the northern tower base. At other tower bases, there are equipment boxes, which hold some of the other remotes and relay boxes. Ham Plus 8x4 switch was selected as my primary antenna switch for the transmit/receive side on those TX antennas. And Green Heron Everywhere was used for all relay and rotor control. Using a mix of VA6AM and 403A high power bandpass filters and triplexers, 2K7NV prop pitches and an Orion 2800 are in use. All the rotors are controlled by the GHE RT21s, GH-RT21s. And I'm excited to try here next contest season, a custom K9AY 8x4 remote switch that's shortly to be implemented that Gary was able to make for me. This is an early photo of the equipment shed. Ham Plus 8x4, some stack match boxes from Jan out in Czechoslovakia. And the high power bandpass filters and triplexers are mounted on a piece of plywood. RT21 is seen here. There's a lot more in the shed now, but that was one of the best pictures that I could find, as I'm not currently on site. KF7P entry box to the shack. Chris was kind enough to send me one in a hurry. I used some nice photos off the internet to try to do my best rendition of a nice clean setup. But it does make me feel good to know that all of my coax and my WISP Cat5 cable is coming in and is being grounded properly, especially when I'm seeing the monsoons all around me. The shack selected was a tough shed 16 by 24. I selected it to be built on a raised pad that my civil engineer had come up with so that it wouldn't flood during some of our water runoffs. And I had a company come out and put a 40-foot, 9-foot tall, what's called a high cube C container in place next to the shed. Inside the shack, the radio and amplifiers. This is basically a piece of plywood on top of some sawhorses I picked up from Lowe's. Surprisingly, the temporary desk is probably going to be my final desk. I have 3 feet of space behind it and at least 3 feet of space on either side of it, so that while we're operating, equipment changes and diagnostic tests can be done in an efficient manner. I think all hams have experienced that oh crap moment, and then during a contest tried to get through the rat's nest, and pulling things forward, oftentimes may result in disconnecting current equipment that's working. So it's a great thing to be able to just walk in behind the desk and start figuring out what may or may not be going wrong. So we got a pair of old K3s on the desk, An ACOM 2000A. Right now, Dan N6WIN had brought over his 87A to use for this particular contest. And donated from Doug, N6RT is one of W6EEN's old Alpha 78s from his big contest station out in Southern California. W6EEN is now a silent key. A Flex 6600 is used for the SDR, showing possible band openings. So we'll monitor 10 and 15 right now, usually, and maybe 160 or 80 at night, whatever we're not on, just to see what's happening on the band. As most of you know, it can be extremely useful to catch those 10-meter and sometimes elusive 15-meter openings. How does it work? In 2020, January NAQP sideband, it was Dan's second contest from the QTH. He was able to win first place, single up all band, low power with 1591 Qs, 192 mults, and 305,000 points. He was operating as AK7AA over at my station. After he had placed third the weekend before in January CW, Dan came over and he absolutely dominated 20 meters with 1,009 claimed Qs. And he won between the two efforts, the combined NAQP plaque. For our first two big outings, I thought that was quite an accomplishment. In the 2027 QP, I was able to set a new W7 record in single up assisted CW high power. With 1520 Qs, 67 mults, and 305,000 points operating as ND7K from my station. My only regret, honestly, was just not planning on operating this contest. I recall waking up in the morning at about 5:30. Let's say the contest starts at 600 local, I forget now. But it was along those lines, and I didn't have a log set up. I didn't have any desire to operate. But K8IA, Bob, is always the motivator. Remember him sending me a text the night before and said, just get up and see what you can do. And next thing I know, I was going the full contest straight. My wife was just wondering, hey, I thought this was supposed to be a family day. Definitely will be a day on the calendar that, if at all possible, I'll be operating the 7th QP. It was a lot of fun. In the 2020 WPXCW, we were able to claim second place W7 record in the single up all band high power category. There were 3564 Qs made with 1,015 mults for 8.3 million points. Dan was operating ND7K at my station. He will most likely, however, lose to KI6RRN Axel in the log check for the Zone 3 win. Both had a phenomenal contest. Club member Steve, N2IC, narrowly beat out both by something in the neighborhood of 100,000 points on the claim side. I think it's all going to come down to log check, but as we all know, Steve is an accurate logger. I believe he will have finished first in the club. But coming from Zone 4, it's always tough to keep up with Steve because of his great QTH, his great knowledge. And he's just a little bit closer over there to Europe. So we're going to be in the hunt for Steve, but he's going to be a tough one. We know that. In the IARU 2020, Dan again was able to set a new record. He set a W7 and a Zone 6 claim record in single op all band mixed high power. He scored 3,999 Qs. I remember the last minute of the contest, looking at him and wondering, why don't you call CQ again? He was trying real hard, but just nobody would call in. And I remember during that last 5 minutes, he had a dupe, and we were just both, shaking our fists angrily type thing. Of course, we work all the dupes. We don't try to correct them and stuff. There's no time for that. And anyhow, 39.99 Qs, 229 mults for 2.9 million points. That is enough to break a 12-year-old record. Without a doubt, that our good buddy Chris KL9A has set up from our equally good friend Joe NK7U station, big monster station up in Oregon. So we were very proud of that moment, without a doubt. During that contest, we had motivated a number of operators from the West, K7RL Mitch, KL9A over at Pat, N9RV Superstation, and Axel, KI6RRN, one of the biggest up-and-coming hams that's really has already proved himself in his own right, was operating at WA6TQT's Southern California Monster Station. We called it the Western Shootout. Everybody was on live scores. The boys operating themselves had pledged not to look at live scores, and everybody stuck to it, and it was one of the funner contests that they've had in a long time. We're hoping to do a repeat of it in 2021. So rag chews. They're very enjoyable QSOs nowadays, as the many stack options reduce QSB, making for a delightful, easy to understand conversation. DX pileups are fun. Oftentimes I'll go 100 watts or less for the added challenge. Receive is a whole new world versus always having lived on a city lot. The amount of things that we can hear from this QTH is phenomenal. Inviting friends over to enjoy our shared hobby with a large shack is great. Internet station interference has been minimized by the optimum placement of those three 130-foot towers. Maybe something about Reed and George's book has paid off. Some interference, however, is coming from the 70-foot crank-up, as that tower was placed as an NA stack after we had some experiences in the January NAQPs. It was definitely an afterthought. In general, we can be within 2 to 3 kilohertz of a second harmonic, however. Scott, K7ZO, has helped us with determining how we are doing in regards to azimuths. As shown in this chart right here, we were able to determine that for NA purposes, we definitely wanted to put our stack aimed at 75 degrees, and in concrete, the crank-up tower was placed so that the fixed lower mid-try was always at that direction. It's a big deal, as you know, when you're buying concrete in the neighborhood of $130 a cubic yard and paying for backhoes to come in and so forth to set a tower, you want to make sure that you've pre-planned and really are thinking about just how that tower is going to be oriented for your purpose. So honestly, watching a WRTC winner pilot the station is truly mind-boggling. Having 2 to 3 radios going with interleaf QSOs and antennas being pointed at odd directions is very educating. His experience from throughout the world is shown in how the station is used. Who am I referring to? Well, of course, Dan and N6MJ. Learning Arizona propagation while utilizing the many TX and RX options is pure enjoyment for the both of us. What's planned? More stacks with 10, 15 meters and a lower K3LR 40 meter OWA at 70 feet. Better RX options. An 80 meter K3LR 4 square, half of his existing 4x4 square back in Pennsylvania. And future replacement of the aging K3s with reliable and non-latency issue radios that have high definition pan adapters. Currently, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, I'm en route to K3LR for another trailer load of antennas. Tim has been amazing in his desire to help us out with the build here. As pictured at Tri-County Towers is currently those aluminum towers. They're going to make up the 4 square. I believe I have a buyer for the other 4 square, but if anybody's interested, please hit me up offline. And pictured here, I believe this is the 15 meter Yagis. Could be a combination of the 10 and 15s, but Tim has quite the haul for me, and I'm looking forward to going to his QTH again. He's very hospitable. Any questions? Okay, Lee.